Cool.
Went ahead and started recording, so we should be good to go with that.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
There we go.
Perfect. And we'll just take up as much of the screen as we can. Although we're also going to need this.
Oh, yeah.
Probably need that to be very, very big. Okay. So we'll just give like another minute, maybe.
Yeah, I think there's quite a few more people signed up for this on the Moodle course, so I'd give it another couple minutes.
Let's see here. Let me make sure I get to the course. Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah, last I checked, there was like 15.
Yeah.
All right. You're still picking up my main desktop there?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm just going to get a second monitor for myself here so I have more room.
Yeah, it's showing in like almost a quarter of a larger white screen right now.
Oh, is it being funky? Let me unshare and reshare, just because I just opened
Okay.
my laptop lid.
Oh, gotcha.
As you know,
yeah, that might have been it.
likes to throw everything into disarray.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so all right. I hope that's better.
Yeah. Yep.
Great.
Perfect.
All right, I think we can probably go ahead and get started with the crew that we have now.
Okay. I'm going to mute and just let me know if you need anything.
Excellent, yeah. Okay, so welcome everyone. Congratulations for being the few, the brave that are wanting to tackle Git today. It's a really fun topic, I think. So we'll do like a little bit of discussion. I didn't get a lot of like woo clap or any of those types of things together for this one because it's basically just 100% hands-on is really the best way to learn, I think. So we have a few kind of introduction things to talk about, just housekeeping sort of stuff. But after that, I have in the Moodle course, if you're not in the Moodle course, go ahead and open that up now. And if you want the direct link, I'll go ahead and paste that in the chat. I mean, you should already be in here, I guess, if you came through the Zoom link. But if not, there's the link. And what you'll find in here is in our main section, we have this crash course. So we'll be looking, that's a Moodle lesson that we're going to be going through. And hopefully all of you are going to be working along and completing it today. So really quickly, I want to make sure that we all have the checklist of stuff that we're going to need. So I'll go through it real quick. So first, we're going to need to make sure that we have Git installed on the computer that you're on, and there are instructions there. It's just a few minutes to install usually. I put through in some documentation that can be very handy to go back to. You probably won't really need it while we go through the course, but if you end up working back through things afterwards or continuing on from what you learned today, you would definitely need it. And then we are going to need a command line application today. And apologies, I did send out an announcement through the Moodle course a day or so ago with this list, but it seems like a lot of people signed up in the last day. So apologies if anyone missed this. But if you're on a Mac or Linux computer, just go ahead and open the terminal application up. You'll be fine. If you're on Windows, if you're on a new enough version, I think there's just an app called Windows Terminal that you can download either through the Windows kind of like App Store. That would work, or you might be able to get it elsewhere, just like a straight download. Or if you really don't have access to that stuff, you can always set up like a virtual box machine with Ubuntu or another Linux distro to use. And then you'll also need a GitHub account, unless you already have like a GitLab or another alternative that you already like to use. So if everyone could, in Zoom, click on the participants screen. And I know Zoom is pretty good about hiding stuff when I'm doing a screen share, so you can't probably see that I'm looking at the participant screen. But if you can, go ahead and actually, we don't have the little polling here, do we? Alan, would you mind throwing a poll out real quick that just says, do you have what you need or something like that?
Yeah, sure.
Great. So we can just have everyone go ahead and just let me know if you have everything that you need to participate, or if you're just planning on watching today, that's okay too. Of course, we welcome you to join us that way too. So while Alan's getting that out, I do want to start a discussion a little bit just about like why you would even consider using Git for Moodle admin tasks. So to share like some of my background, I've been working with Moodle for a number of years, but up until a few years ago, I was really more of a front-end admin kind of person. And then when I kind of had the opportunity to step into a full admin role for a real enterprise Moodle install, it already had Git set up. So we had like a workflow, and I basically got the keys, the usernames and passwords, and was just kind of told, here you go, learn it, right? So the curve was pretty steep for me. Definitely took me a while to really get comfortable with it. And so I wanted to kind of share some of that experience, and then also kind of talk about the reasons why you'd want to be using Git from an admin perspective. So first off, it's just a huge increase in speed, and you'll see with the first activity that we do, like I know others here are probably Moodle admins in which you have the capability to just click a button to like install updates, or maybe you use like FTP to manage your updates, things like that. So you'll find that once you get handy with Git, it's just so fast. Like you don't have to make backups, you don't have to drag folders around, you don't have to really manage uploading and downloading yourself. You just type those few key commands in, and Git sort of does its magic, and you get your updates that you need, or you deploy your code to a new server or whatever it is. It also lets you work through SSH, or secure shell, to do all of your updates. So again, that kind of goes back to some of that efficiency, of course, because you're not like navigating around multiple different folders and dragging files around. But it's also really important for security. So one of the things in an enterprise Moodle environment, whether you're corporate or higher ed or whatever, is that your IT people that are managing your servers might have a requirement that your web server is not actually allowed to like write files itself. So that's sort of a very standard security precaution that is normally taken. And that means that if you're used to going in and clicking the button to tell Moodle, like, okay, go ahead and update everything that you need to update and have it take care of, that won't work in a lot of enterprise environments. Another huge one is sites with many plugins. So We'll make it through, I hope, the lesson to talk about submodules, which is an extremely efficient way to handle a lot of plugin code. So again, if you're in that situation where you can't just tell Moodle, okay, update all the plugins that need updates, submodules are really the next best thing, where once it's set up, you basically just tell Git, okay, any of these plugins that are needing updates, pull all those down, and you're able to do it with just a few commands really quickly. Of course, if you're wanting to do customizations, like if there's some CSS that you always change, or a particular plugin set that you always know you want to roll with, and you want to be able to quickly just spin up a new Moodle server and get the code out there, once you have this Git set up, it's super fast to do that as well. And then another one that is, again, sort of specific to the larger Moodle site kind of environments. Often when we're dealing with that, we have not just one Moodle web server, but kind of like a bank of Moodle web servers or a tier of web servers and separated out data servers. So in that case, it becomes like you're not just dealing with updating the files in one spot. It might be 2 or 4 or 5 different servers. And Git is really amazing for making sure that you're putting the exact same set of code everywhere that you're touching. And if you get even deeper into some of the Linuxy kind of stuff or scripting, you can even do it all everywhere at once, which is pretty neat. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts on this part, like why use Git? Does anyone else want to unmute yourself and share why you're interested? Let's give it a moment. No takers for that one. Okay, smart crowd.
I'm mainly interested in
Yeah.
How to do Git pulls for updating.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll definitely cover that for sure. So, okay, so we have that stuff kind of out of the way. So I'm going to dive in to start showing you what the lesson here format kind of looks like. So if everyone wants to go under the Git for Moodle Admins header and click on the Git for Moodle Admins crash course, I've called it. This is set up as a Moodle lesson. So the first one is called Cloning Moodle. You'll see there's a lesson menu over on the right side, and you can kind of jump around between the different categories or the different topics. But we're going to kind of go through those. So I think what we should probably do is sort of a show and then do. So I'll walk through kind of each of these and then give everyone a few minutes to try it or just catch up if you're kind of following along, and we can address any questions that come up. And so there's, really 4 of these. I think it'll probably take us pretty close to the hour, if not the full hour, to get through them. If we don't get through them, another thing that I have done, just because it's Git and we're all coming with different sets of, hardware, software, and stuff. If we don't make it all the way through, if you scroll to the bottom, there's a continue button to go to the next topic, but there's also like a watch a help video. So I just made videos of myself going through this. If we don't get through everything, or if you're not able to keep caught up with it, you can always come back to this course and watch the help videos if you need a little bit of extra help getting through it. But with that said, I'm gonna go ahead and start diving in. So if you have your terminal application ready to go ahead and open that up and start following along with me. And I'm also, I'm going to try to make sure that I'm not assuming like Linux knowledge really as we go along. So I'm going to try to explain what any of the Linux stuff that I'm doing also is. But if I forget and you have a question, please pop it in the chat or unmute yourself and let us know, and make sure to help keep me honest on that. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do is just grab a fresh copy of Moodle from Git. So if you don't know, everything that Moodle does, 99% of plugins and the main project are all hosted on GitHub. And that's sort of the platform that they use. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over to my command line interface. Hopefully everyone can see that. I can probably make it even a little bigger. And I'm going to navigate to the directory where I want to install Moodle. So right now, if I do a pwd, that's a command that shows the current working directory. You can see I'm just on my Mac in my home directory under users. So where I want to install Moodle today is I'm just going to use my desktop because that's an easy place for me to put it, right? So I'm going to do a cd, which stands for change directories, and that helps me navigate. And then I'm just going to start typing desktop, and then hit tab to complete my command. Okay, and then now I can see that I've navigated to my desktop. So at this point, I'm ready to go ahead and I want to pull the Moodle files onto my desktop. If you were like on a Linux server or a Windows server, you would have, of course, like a very specific directory where you want to put that stuff in the root directory of your web server. But I'm going to go ahead and start just typing out my commands. So git is always the command to, anytime you're invoking any kind of git command, you start with git. And then clone is what we're going to use to say we want to copy something off of a Git repository. And then you're going to see this a lot, a -b, and that stands for branch. And we can talk a little bit about the concept of branches, but essentially it's a version control system, right? So any updates that are made to the 3.5 version of Moodle are going to live on this Moodle 3.5 branch, and then as 3.6, 3.7, all the way through 3.9 come out, they get their own branches, and that allows the Moodle HQ to be pushing out updates to all those different versions at the same time, and I can specify which one I need, right? The next thing that goes in this command is a URL, and that's saying where we want to actually pull from. And then the very last thing we have is a directory where we want to install this to. So this is actually going to create a new directory on my desktop called mootdev. Now before I hit enter, I want to point out that in the lesson I also put a lower bandwidth version because the full, like when you're downloading from Git, I'm asking for the 3.5 branch of Moodle, but it's actually getting all of the data for all of the Moodle branches downloaded. So it can be very hefty. And so when I was planning this session, I was thinking, oh, we'll be in the Carroll library. We'll have like super fast internet and it'll be awesome. But if you're in a spot where you feel like you don't necessarily have very fast internet, you should use this lower bandwidth version. And just imagine that, instead of the official Moodle GitHub, you're using this GitHub repository, libncon/moot-low bandwidth instead. So you might even want to do that just if you feel no need to work with the full Moodle file set and you just want to work with a few Moodle files. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and we'll see GitHub start to do its thing. You can see it's cloning. Hopefully my internet's going fast today, actually. Normally I have fiber optic, so normally this just takes like a minute, but sometimes it decides to go really slow, and we don't necessarily have time for that. And I think this is one of those times. I might blame Zoom for that, so I'm actually going to cancel that and clear my screen out. Let's see what I have here. And it didn't actually make the folder yet, so I'm going to hit up on my keyboard a few times in a terminal that lets you pull back or show commands that you already ran. And I'm going to change the URL that I'm using to the low bandwidth for the example. So hopefully you can see this. I'm just copying this one. And right after the Moodle _35_stable, I'm using the low bandwidth repository. And look how much faster that is. Very nice. All right, so hopefully a lot of us just did our first git command, or our first git command in a while. Anyone has any questions right now? Now's a great time to pause for questions. I'll just give a few seconds.
I just wanted to add, this is Randy, I just wanted to add that at the end of your command, you put the name of the directory, mootdev. If you don't put one, it will by default create a directory called Moodle. Right. That could be a disaster if that's where your Moodle is. so yeah. Follow Ben's advice and always put that directory name you're installing into just in case.
Yeah, thank you, Randy. Yeah, I always find that I always like to specify, even like sometimes you don't need to specify the branch, but I always am in the habit of just specifying as much of those two things as you can to save yourself some confusion and trouble. Okay, so we kind of already talked about what those different elements of the command did. So again, we'll just kind of reiterate. So Git, we're always typing Git anytime we're invoking the Git application. Cloning is what allows us to make a copy, essentially, like a working copy. It's almost like checking out a document from SharePoint or something. We're saying like, this is the copy that I'm going to work on. And then -B is letting us specify which branch we want to use. And mootdev is just the name that I chose to create a folder. So you could use any name that you like. Okay, so we're going to now use that cd command to go into that mootdev folder. And we're going to type a git status. And this is just letting us know we're on the branch Moodle 3.5 stable. We're up to date with something called origin / Moodle 3.5 stable. So origin is the name that Git will always give by default to the remote repository. So when you first create a new Git project. So before I even show you Git pull, why don't I actually show this? So if I type git remote, it's going to show me, okay, you have one remote, it's called origin. There's really nothing special about origin, it's just the name that it gives to the first one. And if I type a git remote and put a V flag at the end of that, so git remote -V, it gives me even a little bit more information. So I see the name, origin of the remote, and then also the URL. And I ended up using the low bandwidth version of that, of our available things that we were going to test with. So you can see that it's, in the event that I'm pushing or pulling stuff, which we'll talk about, it's pulling from that URL. Okay, so I know we wanted to talk about doing git pull, so this is a perfect opportunity to do that. So I'm in the mootdev folder. I'm going to go ahead and type git pull, and it's just giving you a message, hey, guess what? You're already up to date, because in fact, we just got the latest version. But honestly, that's all that you need to do to pull down any updates, is just go into that folder, type git pull, it pulls down the updates in a very similar process to how we did that git clone. It's just going to pull down any changes that have been made. So that was almost like too easy, right? Barely anything really to that. We just cloned it. We learned how to do a git pull to make an update. All right, so let's start working through the next section here. Again, if anyone has any questions, I think this is a small and quiet enough group. Go ahead and just unmute yourself and ask if you have a question, or type into the chat anytime. And Alan's helping me keep an eye on that.
I got locked up. It started to create the directory and then ran into an error.
Oh, what does your error say?
And now it's fully qualified error, native command error.
Oh boy.
Um,
Are you on Linux or Windows?
I'm on Windows. I'm on Windows.
Ah, so unfortunately, the Windows, I'm not as able to help with that.
Yeah.
This whole process
just keep going. Just keep
okay.
going. Yeah.
I was going to say it probably has something to do with. It might have something to do with needing to run as an administrator. Would be my guess. But so you might try that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and go into the mootdev folder. You can see from our prompt that's where we are, and I'm going to again just make the most basic of changes. So I'm going to type echo hello world in quotes, and then a caret hello.txt. So all I'm doing here is I'm creating a text file that has the text hello world in it. Right, and I should be able to see that if I use a text viewing app or a text viewing program on my terminal. This is what I just created. So super basic and simple, nothing to it, but it's a customization that I've made to my Moodle project, right? So now if we do a git status, you'll see we're still up to date with our remote, but we now have what's called an untracked file, which means Git is basically going to be aware of everything that's in your project, but unless you explicitly tell Git to keep track of it, it's not going to do so. So I could continue doing like git pull in this directory, and it's just saying already up to date, no changes. So any other changes would kind of happen next to without actually affecting that hello .txt file. But let's go ahead and tell Git that we do want to track that. So I'm going to type git add, and then I can do the hello.txt. Another trick that I like to use, because typically we are making more than one tiny little change at a time, if you type git add and then a period, that just adds everything. All right, let's just run git status again just to see where we're at. So it says, hey, we're still up to date, but now we have changes that are they're to be committed, but they're not actually committed yet. And it's actually good to know that you can always get out. You can you can always remove stuff from this point as well if you find out that you added things that you don't want to add. But we're going to go ahead and commit. So we'll do git commit. If you just hit enter, or you do have to specify the. Oh no, sorry. So what I was going to say is, if you just hit enter now, it would open up your default text editor and let you type a commit message. But oftentimes that's really more trouble than it's worth. So typically I just put a flag on the end of the commit command here. So I would type git commit -m, which means I want to include the message right here. And I'll just say I added a hello world message in quotes. So commit or git commit -m, start quote, put your message, end quote, and then hit enter. So now you see Git has sort of summarized what I've done here. It has this hash, which means that there's now like a specific Git version that is associated with this version that I've just created. And it's letting me know it changed one file, it inserted one file. Okay. We'll do git status again. Okay, and we have an interesting new message. So our branch is now ahead of origin by one commit, which makes sense because we just did one commit. And now we can use git push to publish the local commits. That means we can take what we just did and we can push it back up somewhere, okay? Now, you don't have, at least I don't really, wasn't careful how I set it up, but you should not be able to commit back to my repository. So if you used the low bandwidth version, I own that repository and I have not given you permission to push stuff to it. Likewise, Moodle has not given me permission to push stuff to their repository either, right? So what we need now is to create our own GitHub repository where we can keep all of our customizations. Okay, so that would be the next step. Okay, so let's, before we get through this one, can we throw another poll up real quick? Just checking in, like, are people feeling okay? Are we pretty caught up? Do we need to slow down, speed up? Maybe if everyone can just type in the chat how you're doing, because I know this is a lot of relatively complicated stuff that we're doing at distance today. Some goods, good, okay. Fine, all right. You guys are amazing, okay. So at this point, we're ready to set up some sort of remote repository. I recommend GitHub. It's just sort of the Moodle default way to do things. But again, if you have like a GitLab or somewhere else that you want to use, that's fine. So let's go ahead and visit GitHub. And you would need to make an account real quick if you haven't done that yet. I think you can even sign in with like social accounts, Google and whatever, if you want to do it that way. Once you are all signed in and ready to go, what we're going to do is create a new repository. So you should have a plus sign that you can get to up here, and you'll click New Repository. And I'm just going to name mine Moot. I'm not going to bother with any of the descriptions or anything. I'm not going to bother public or private. If you do end up using Moodle for like an actual school or company account, you would want to set it up probably a private repository just to keep your code off of the internet. And then you want to leave the checkboxes and the option to add things just on the defaults. So skip that step. And then we're going to create a repository. Okay. So it's giving us some suggestions of what we might want to do. And what we're actually wanting to do is push an existing repository from the command line. That is our task. So if we come back over here, we can basically follow the example that it gave, with the exception of that we can't use the name origin to refer to this new remote that we just created, because we already have one called origin in our project, but it's on our desktop. So we're going to type git remote add, and I'm just going to call this Moot Hub. And then you are going to want to copy the address of the one that should have your GitHub username in it, and then whatever name that you chose for your repository, and paste that in. So mine ended up saying git add or git remote add Moot Hub, and then the address of the remote. Okay, so now when I do a git remote -v, I now have two options there. So origin and then Moot Hub, and that's just the names that I chose. So you can kind of see how this sets you up, right? So if we look at this graphic, you're going to have the main Moodle Git repo. You're going to pull stuff like your code or any updates to your code down to a test or a staging server. That way you can test out things before you put it into production. You're then going to push those changes to a private Git repo, like the one that we just created. And then finally, you're going to pull those to your production server, right? So you have this nice kind of flow, and you're able to test things out before putting them into a live environment, but also move very fast just by typing a few commands. And you can do it all from your same computer. Okay, so how that looks is we already sort of talked about the git pull again. So there's no updates available from origin because, again, it's just the low bandwidth version that I made. But if I wanted to pull down updates to my staging server, I would do git pull origin. We're up to date. And then when I want to push out, I can do git push and then Moot Hub. Remember, just Moot Hub is the name that I gave to that remote. Okay, let's go over here. This is, again, the remote. So I'm just going to refresh the page after I've done a push. And you can see it's not, of course, the full Moodle, but all the Moodle that I did have as part of that lower bandwidth version is here. And we can look at it. And even the hello.txt file is here as well. All right, so again, that's sort of the basic flow. That is really the bulk of it, especially if you're not doing a lot with plugins. But you could see how you could use that, and you could like come on your dev server, and you could install plugins just like by dragging and dropping the files in or using FTP or whatever. Test them out there, push those changes up to your private repo, and then pull them down to your test server. And that's a perfectly fine way to manage things. We just put all of your plugins as part of your main project. But if you want to take things a step further, you can also use what are called submodules to help you manage with your plugins. I find that definitely to be the steepest learning curve part. I think everything we've done so far is actually pretty straightforward. The submodules can be a little bit tricky, but they're extremely powerful. So go ahead and move on to the next part here for submodules. I'm glad we have about almost half the time left just to talk about submodules. Okay, so the concept of a submodule, like what it is it's basically a way to keep a whole other Git project as a like subcomponent of your main project. What that really means is that you can manage the updates to it and the version of it independently of the main project. So it's just a nice way to help manage the plugins, because you can kind of create these mini Git projects that are included in your larger project, but they're just pulling their updates from the plugin repositories that are also all hosted on GitHub. So it kind of like lets you take advantage of the work that the developers are doing to help you automate things and just get the plugins as they publish them, or any updates to the plugins as they publish them, rather. So let's go ahead and just try adding one. So I'm going to add the scheduler. It's a pretty popular Moodle plugin, I would say, activity. So let's just go over the commands and see how it works. So I'm in my main Moot Dev folder, and I'm going to do a git and then submodule and add. Again, I'm specifying a branch. Now, it's important to note, and actually let's go, before we do this, let's actually visit this page. I think that might make things more clear. So every Moodle plugin, for the most part, is hosted on GitHub, and they're supplying multiple versions of their plugin also that align with whichever versions of Moodle they support. But they don't always match one for one, so you do have to kind of keep an eye out on this. So in this case, for example, I would need to probably go look at the plugin page on the main Moodle plugin repository to find out which one of these versions actually supports the version of Moodle that I'm on. In this case, I'm a little bit lucky because there's just a version called Moodle_35 stable. So I have a pretty good idea that that is supporting Moodle 3.5. But if I was on like Moodle 3.6, I'm not sure which one of these versions I would need. I would have to go to the plugin page to check that. And sometimes they don't even use this nice Moodle sort of naming convention. They'll name it like, after a plate. They'll kind of like do like Apple does and name it after like a nice natural park or something. So it's just something to be aware of. Okay, but in this case, I know I need Moodle_35_stable, and then the URL of that repository we were just looking at. And then in this case, we do need to be really careful on supplying the path to where it's going to be installed to. Because as we know, if you install Moodle plugins to the wrong place, they complain and they do not work. So definitely caution on this part, and spelling counts. But that's the whole command that I would need to add a submodule. Oh, apparently I've already done it in this folder. That's interesting. Check something. It's crazy. I had another folder on my desktop named Moot Dev, so I wonder if it's somehow still a Git thing installed there. So let's just find a different plugin to install. Let's just check the Moodle plugins repository. Let's go with Poodle. This is actually a good example. So I'm going to click on the versions. To see which versions I might be able to use. So it looks like there's one called version 3.1, and that supports version 3.1 and up. So I know which one I need to probably grab once I get to the Poodle repository. And if I look under useful links on any of these plugin pages, there's always going to be one that says source control URL. And that's going to take you to the GitHub or to the other repository type page that you might need. So it's probably this Poodle 3 default one. If we look at the version.php file, that can often give us a clue. Yeah, so this one is requires Moodle 3.1. It's version 3.102. So that's another good trick if you're not sure about the version that you're looking at in GitHub, is you can actually browse the files and look at the version.php file. So we'll just go ahead and copy this one. So I'm in the repository, clicking code, and then clicking the button to copy the URL there. And we're going to do git submodule add, specify our branch, which is called Poodle 3. Hit in that URL, and then it's going to go in our repository folder, which I may have deleted for my low bandwidth version, so I'm going to have to create it. And then Poodle with 2 L's. So we'll hope this works. Let's see. All right, awesome. Back on track there. Okay. So I think if everyone wants to go ahead and practice that process and see if you can install a submodule, let's take like a 3-minute break to give everyone a chance to kind of go through that process. And we'll check back at like 1:43. Okay, awesome. So if anyone was able to get a submodule installed, go ahead and type in the chat the one that you picked. It's going to be interesting to see what people picked. We'll do one more for sort of a practice. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this one, just module called MooTyper, because I think it has a fun sounding name. So I'll just do one more. So we're doing git submodule add. In this case, the branch is called Moodle _ 350 _ stable. Then I'm going to copy the URL. And this one needs to go in the mod folder. It's called MooTyper. Oh, and I actually got an error message on that one. So you can see actually, sometimes these do take a little bit more planning. Not necessarily a good idea to do one on the fly. Okay, well, let me see what I can show you guys so that we can kind of review what we did and understand a little bit more about how the submodules are working. So you're going to notice in the folder after you have installed a submodule for the first time that there's going to be a new file in your folder called Git Modules. And this is, you can almost think of it like a manifest that's listing all of the plugins that you want to have as submodules in your project. So I'm going to look at my Git Modules file. And so far, it just has the one that we were able to do successfully. But it's really getting just those three key pieces of information that Git needs to keep your submodule plugin up to date. So the path where it's installed, the remote repository where it's pulling from, and the branch that you want. So we're just going to keep rolling with the one for now because we are running out of time. But if I type a git status in here, you're going to see a really similar to message to when we just created that hello world file. So except that it's skipped the phase where it's not tracking it because you already added it as a submodule. So now it just wants to know if you want to commit those changes to your project. So we will go ahead and do a git add period. Oh, interesting. Well, this is why Git is tricky, right? It's throwing things at me that honestly I've never even seen before, and so it had something to do with that that second thing that the second mood typer that I added. Maybe I was distracted and I accidentally tried to add it with the git clone command instead of the git submodule command. Entirely possible that's what happened. But you know what I have right here in the Mountain Moot course, just in case things don't go right when you're presenting, is I have a copy of this. I'm just going to see if I can re-download real fast. Downloading. Oh no, we seem to have hit my my ISP deciding that I've downloaded too much today. All right, just a few seconds left of this download. Okay, and we'll let that expand. But we'll just go through sort of the pre-prepared comments there to wrap up. On submodules, since we are running short of time here, which I was afraid might happen. So essentially, you're going to end up with your Git modules file that is kind of like your manifest, like I was saying. It's your list of all the plugins that you want to use in your project. Then you're going to be able to commit those just like you commit really any other change. So with that git command, or that git add command. So what that then allows you to do is just do a simple command every time that you want to update your plugin list. All it takes is this command right here, git submodule update -- remote. That takes any pending updates that are available from any of those Git repositories for your plugins and just updates all of them in just one swoop. So you can sort of imagine how much faster and easier that is than saying like, okay, let me look at which plugins might need updates and then download those files to make sure all those files get put in all the right places. It just makes it much, much faster and easier to manage. If you only want to update one particular plugin, you also can just specify that at the end of the git submodule update remote command, just the path to whichever submodule or submodules that you want to update. So if there's things that you don't want to update, you don't have to when you run that command as well. I'm just going to highlight really quickly some of the information that's on this page because it is super useful as well. So if you have a project that includes submodules that you're pushing out to a new server, you can include this command on the end. It's just a -- recurse - submodules. That's going to, like, as it deploys your Moodle code to a new location, just also grab all the latest version of the submodule code as well. And also, if you ever find yourself in the position where you need to change one of the submodules, there are just like a few steps that you want to learn how to do that. But essentially, you just update your Git modules file and then sync it to your project, and that would let you, like, if a plugin changes maintainers and you need to change the URL that you're pointing to for the repository, or if you are updating to a newer version of Moodle and you need to change from branch 3.5 to 3.9 or things along those lines, it's really easy to do once you know the commands to do it. Okay, so thanks everybody. That was sort of the crash course. I know I kind of ended up crashing there at the end by trying to just quickly jump in and find like strange looking plugins to use as examples. So certainly we have a few minutes if anyone has questions that they want to ask, or if you want to connect with me afterwards. In Moodle, in the Mountain Moodle site, you can definitely use this messaging function if you want to just send me a quick message. I've been checking those and getting back to people that way. Or you can also email me at kahn@up.edu, which is KAHN@up.edu. Other than that, we'll leave this course up as long as the Moot site is available. So if you want to go back and work through these at your own pace, there's a lot of information here. So you can definitely do that and check out the video tutorials again that are at the bottom of each one of the lesson topics. But yeah, other than that, I'm available for any questions or comments for a few more minutes. And other than that, please enjoy the rest of your Moot.
Ben, I have a question. That has to do with the syntax for the submodule, where at the end you're putting the path for the plugin, like mod / Moodle.
Yeah.
Is that a convention, or is that actually creating the directory so that it has to match what the directory is in Moodle?
So typically you are installing a plugin file that doesn't exist yet in your installation of Moodle, right? So
exactly.
It is creating it. You just have to make sure you get the path exactly right. I mean, typically it'll only be creating the last, the endpoint of that. So like when you're installing like the scheduler plugin, the path you need to put in is mod /scheduler.
The mod.
But it's the
so
it's the path from where you're at in your Git project to the location. But
so it basically has to match.
It does have. Yeah, it's very important that it matches. Otherwise, what you'll get is when you go to run the install, I'm sure you've all seen that, just the bracket doesn't know the plugin name that it's waiting to install. So in that case, you have to basically remove the plugin or remove the submodule and start over.
Yeah, and you'd have to put it in its proper place. So you have this set of submodules then that you're updating with the one command. You're updating them all at the same time and pulling them. But because they're submodules of the main project, so when you're doing a pull of the whole thing, that directory tells it where it has to go in the main tree.
So there actually already is, like once you've installed it, it's already there. And I know we are short on time.
Okay, got it.
But
Good. No, it makes perfect sense. It's just that I thought it was interesting that you have to tell it that where it goes, because it's, yeah, okay.
yeah, I believe you do. And that also is part of the that's how Git registers it as a submodule of the main project as well. It uses the path.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Um,
I mean, this is the way you would normally do it anyway, of course.
right, right.
So it makes sense that it just depends on that as the
Yeah,
convention.
so I
Yeah.
can kind of show. I mean, this should just take a second. I have a site that needs updates. You can see this one has a bunch of different submodels installed.
Oh, yeah,
So if
yeah.
I just
Uh-huh.
do like a sudo, here, let me make this bigger even.
Nice.
Sudo git submodule update, and then I want to pull from the remotes. So this is, it's doing like, 8, 9, 10, however many plugins we're waiting. And you can see it's actually just checking out a specific commit to that path that's specified.
Ah, so that's what so update is doing that. So, okay, got it. I've
Yeah,
never
yeah.
used update before, so right, okay.
So I
Okay.
have, yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because we didn't quite get to it. But I have seen people like, you'll try to navigate into the folder where there's a submodule installed and do like a git status in here and see like head detached, like what the heck, right?
Oh, okay, okay, got
Because,
it. Yeah, yeah.
so yeah, you don't want to come in here and try to do like git update from here, or git pull from here rather. Um, because that's just not. I mean, you can do it that way, but it just becomes really confusing and weird. And it's
Yeah,
much
you'd
easier
want
just
to
to
do
do
that from the
it
root.
exactly. You want to treat it as
Yes.
a submodule project, and that's why it's so important that it has the branch specified that you're wanting, because then you're just getting the latest of whatever you want and no further ahead, right?
Yeah, because if you did a submodule and didn't have the branches set up right, or you mixed them, you'd end up with a
Yeah,
real mess.
right. It defaults to master by default if you don't put a branch in, and so that can certainly bite you if that's not the one that you end up needing.
Oh yeah, because let's say you're on 3.5 and you put in master, you're going to get 3.9.
Exactly, exactly right. Yeah,
And that's going to be not why you
or
want.
yeah, or in some cases the dev might just have a
You
master
might,
branch
yeah, I
that they
actually had that
change.
happen
Yeah,
once. I had that
right.
happen once. I got the
Yesterday
dev and I'm
master
like,
was
oops,
yeah, yesterday
because,
master was 3.8, but today it's 3.9. But if you
right,
didn't update your site at the same time, that can be
right.
problematic. So
Okay. Wow. No, I'd never seen the submodules before. Now I totally get it. So that's great. So let me
awesome.
ask you this. Your initial example was where you created the hello.txt and then you put it into the repository and
Uh-huh.
so when you're making, so the typical use that I would use this for, if I'm making some little tweaks to the actual Moodle code,
Hmm.
like I'll take things like take out menu options and maybe add a bug fix or something like that.
Sure.
So I would then want to put those in the right place where I want them. And if they were, and then when I'm going to put them in their own repository, I need to make sure all the structure is exactly the same. I'm
I
just
mean,
talking out loud.
yeah, so I mean, typically you are following that sort of like if you have a staging server, and that's another
Exactly.
nice thing about Git is yeah, you would test it there, push it to your repository that kind of sits in between your staging server and your production server,
Mm-hmm.
and then that lets you just push and pull those copies of the exact same code set. So you don't even, when you go to do, it's a little unnerving actually when you start using Git for the production updates because it takes like 5 seconds. You're just like, I hope I did everything right on dev, git pull, you know? So
That's how I do it, actually. And it
yeah,
is. The first few times you do it, it's really unnerving.
yeah, it's a little strange because it feels like you're being less careful because you did all the work up front.
Right. Okay,
Um,
great. Good. No, submodules, that is a really great explanation. Thank you for that.
cool, yeah, I'm very glad. That was definitely my the hardest part for me to wrap my head around. So
Yeah, I've never been, I just know they exist. And now I'm like, oh, because your example shows me exactly how I would use this in real life. Yeah.
cool. Okay, well, I know we are at time, everyone. So again, thank you so much for joining us, and please, if you want to send any questions, comments, feedback my way, I'm open to chatting more. But other than that, I think we're probably ready to shove off.
Great, thanks, Ben. And again, like Ben said, the course is going to be on the Mountain Moodle setup here for a while. So go back and go through it if you want to go through it and go through it again, just to practice. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is also being recorded, so the video for this will be with the course. So once it's over, I think Ryan's going to be setting those up. I think they're going to transfer them over to YouTube and put them up on the course, so you'll be able to go back and watch this all over again. So
awesome. Okay, thanks, folks. Have a good one.
Great, thanks a lot, Ben. I'm going to go ahead and close this out then.